Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Rob here in my dungeon lair, and this is my State of the Dungeon address. This is the State of the Dungeon address for the game that took place on the 5th of November. The game, 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, the campaign, the tail end of the Princes of the Apocalypse campaign, and the game is rapidly coming to a brisk conclusion. The party, having closed two of the four elemental portals, are looking to do the third. They have now recovered the Spear Wind Vein, and they are ready to go into the air node to try to close that portal. And they were basically convalescing in the home of Otto of the Circle of Eight, who, along with Tensor, was going to send them back to the Air Temple. Actually, as close as he could get. Feathergale Spire, a landmark that they could find, which they were familiar with. Once they got there, it would have been a hike across a valley to get into the cliff face that housed the stairs that go down into the Air Elemental Temple, which they briefly looted before they ended up having to... Well, they withdrew after slaying the Prophet. They did not completely explore this place, however. So, they went to the Feathergale Spire, the lookout point for the advances of the air elemental cults, under power of a teleportation circle by Otto. And when they arrived, they looked up, and there's this big dragon looking down at them. And there's dragons flying around in the storm-bedecked sky. The sky has just opened up with an immense downpour, as it will always do as long as old Hydra is around. So the valley is actually starting to fill with water from this much of a deluge. And the group is looking at a dragon, which they quickly realize is a silver dragon, who slithers down the tower and looks them over, makes sure they're not cultists, realizes they are the heroes, and sends a quick message off to the other dragons. You see, the dragons know about the elemental threats. They generally tend to be fairly smartened up on such things, so a couple of their scholars who studied the elemental cults in the past realized that it was all firing up again, and they let the Dragon Council know, and the good dragons of the population of dragons in the world decided that this needed to stop. They got the okay from the council, which includes technically all of dragonkind, to go and intervene on behalf of the dragons, trying to cut back on the elemental menace, because they realized with old Hydra in the world, she was going to drown the entire world if she could, and there wasn't a great deal anybody could do against her with the powers that she had. So the dragons were taking the fight, destroying elementals, and and dealing with their wrath. So the silver dragon was minding the tower in case the air elemental cults tried to get back, or it was just a good contact point. When the heroes were like, well, we need to get to the air temple, she arranged for Dragon to come and fly them over, because traveling over ground was very difficult. The valley is flooded and prone to just popping up water elementals as old Hydra expands her power out. So that would have been a slog. So eventually, a flight of dragons comes in. These are elder dragons of all of the different chromatic dragons represented: copper, brass, bronze, silver, and gold. And they have a quick powwow, and the bronze dragon comes down and says, well, I will help you out. I need to cast a spell so that you are all immune to lightning, however, because anybody who flies across this valley is prone to being stricken by lightning. For bronze dragons, that's no big deal. Lightning is part and parcel of their abilities, and they're immune to it. So they're fine. The other dragons are less than amused by getting tagged repeatedly by lightning. So The party is, of course, grateful to be made immune to lightning for a little while. And the dragon has a chance to chat with them. They learn a bit about the history of the cults in their world, the cyclical nature, how the valley had played a part in cults of the past rising up, how the nature of the valley is kind of special because it conceals the cult's activities while at the same time sheltering the rest of the world from the worst of their depredations. So, eventually they are prepared. A gold dragon, an ancient gold, comes over and he kind of lords over the fact that he is one of the more powerful and overall more powerful and zealous of dragons. One who volunteered to go in and clear out the air node for the group, but they were told by both representatives of Istus and Bahamut their job was to help the ones who would eventually do it because the balance of the world seemed to lay on them. The group has accepted this fairly well, that a lot of powerful beings have dictated that it's their personal battle against this cult, which is cool. It's kind of nice being special in this, and as they're getting more and more powers too, that seems to be helping quite a bit. All right, so the group flies across. They are warned that there are now flying water elementals to deal with. So that's kind of an issue. They fly across the valley. There's a lightning bolt that hits. They're fine. Another lightning bolt that hits. They're feeling a little tingly. Maybe the power of the spell is starting to wear off. And then they get confronted by a large swarm of these air elementals. They kind of look like a squashed diamond from their profile as they fly and glide around on the air. Kind of clumsily, but they're still water elementals that are airborne. That's something to take into consideration. So the gold dragon lets off with a meteor swarm. Big explosions, very impressive. Because he's a show off. The brass, or the bronze and the gold, clearly annoy each other. The bronze is a kind of a bookish nerd of dragons, so he's kind of an outcast as a scholar, and the gold is just overbearing show off. Something he never grew out of because he's very powerful. So he does that. Their dragon fires off a bolt of lightning, but he finds a way to transform it into in such a way that it encapsulates a number of elementals, and he turns their blast into cold, which deep freezes a number of elementals and they just drop, which surprises the gold a little bit because gold dragons typically don't like cold all that much. And then, as they're still going to have to worry about some of these elementals, Brock, perfect timing, pulls out the hypnotic pattern. The elementals do not have any resistance against that, so it's straight up their wisdoms against, and they're not that wise. So Brock causes a bunch of them to plummet. I believe he took out more than the gold dragon did with his 1 4th level spell, so good on him, Brock. The rest of the group, who are able to fire off a few blasts, but, these elements have well over, 80 hit points each, so unless they really combined fire or had a way to just poof, gone, they didn't have a great deal of impact. One of the elementals splooshed down into the center of them and tried knocking them off the dragon. Only one of them was in danger of being knocked off, which was Brock. To his credit, when they went flying, Brock, before it, he was the only one who said, "I'm going to lash myself to the dragon." He had his rope of the serpent, and he tied it into the dragon's horn. So as he flew and off the dragon, he was left kind of hanging and dangling. The big thing that ended out that kind of encounter, though, was when... was it Terran? Cast haste on the dragon. And all of a sudden, whoosh, that dragon could zip. And he quickly left the whole fight behind. He left the gold dragon to keep tangling with the elementals at his leisure, but they punched through very quickly. And quite honestly, that was really about it. They reeled in Brock, and the dragon landed and basically put them right at the cleft where they could descend down into the air elemental temple. And he told them that he was going to stand pat and make sure that nobody else got in after them, that he was going to guard their back. And when an ancient bronze dragon tells you that, you can rest pretty assured that it's going to stay set unless something truly overwhelming is showing up. This is... I don't know if they ever found out his name either. Karagokhthrix. But definitely a cool dragon. So, but anyhow, I know they changed the tail a little bit for 5th edition. Kind of put it to more of a traditional dragon shape. I like the old one, where they kind of made the dragons with, longer connected wings to the rest of the rills down their backs. But, awesome look. So anyway, the party is now descending down. They quickly go through the air elemental temple. There's really not a lot there to hold them back. They debate whether or not to rest to try to regain Brock's spent spell, and Brock's like, no, I got plenty. So the group eventually decides they're going to descend. I think they rested for 1 hour in the old temple of Muradin that was in the air elemental temple, but that was about it. So they descended down into the Fane of the Eye. Okay. Going down to the Fane of the Eye, they first of all noticed that, there's a lot of water pouring in, which is irritating. They didn't really explore any of the old air elemental temple, went straight in. So as they got down to the Fane of the Eye, they went down a staircase that was the fossilized rib cage of a great worm. And the next room, what do you know? There's a big pit going down, air coming up out of it. They're smart. Yeah, that's the way down to the air node. So they, drop down to the air node. Big descent, but nothing they can't handle. One of the things they did find, though, looting in the air temple, or in the Fane of the Eye, they did find 5 backpacks with balloons in them. These balloon packs allow the air cultists to levitate or featherfall as needed, which is neat. It does take up the spot for their backpack, though, so most adventurers rely on their backpacks for storage. In this case, it's taken up by a large balloon on your back, but it's just such a useful item. The thing is, it can be recharged when you're in the air node. Well, guess where they are. So they used it once, and now they're recharging several of them. So they go down into the air node proper. They descend in turn. Eventually the whole group gets down. And in the air node, it is a series of winding caverns, more so than anything else. It really is just a lot of wind-hewn, rough tunnels and things that kind of a maze of sorts, really. So they descended down. And a couple of the rooms, really not a lot of impact on them. They found one room that had a bunch of bodies in them of monsters and a dead drow with some nice loot on her. They decided they were going to go and investigate the room, and the investigator, of course, was Auric, their usual person to throw into trouble. The problem was Auric ran afoul of a curse, and his breath was sucked out of him. Literally, he couldn't breathe. He fell back, staggering and choking, and the rest of the group had no idea what they could do to help him out. Eventually, he shrugged off the curse because, well, he's a dwarf and he's got a really good constitution and everything. But he was in real peril of dying from this. However, he was exhausted, which does have repercussions throughout. The group found out that, there's some serious magic going on there. Terran decided he was going to figure out what was going on by drinking a gaseous form potion and going into the room, and he failed to save a throw and got sucked out of the room. They lost track of him and haven't seen him since. Again, it's Terran. That's kind of becoming what he does. So at any rate, the group is like, oh my gosh, I don't know, what are we going to do? They do use the rope of the serpent to go over, wind around the leg of the drow and drag her over. They don't find any clues on her, but they do find a nice suit of elven chainmail and a couple of daggers with very nice rubies in the pommels that are worth quite a bit of money, 1,000 gold each. So, you know, that was some good money that they found, but no other real clues at this point. So they go back and around. They find a room with bodies, which is the bottom of the pit where they drop sacrifices down, and an air elemental that's just full of gore and blood from doing horrible things to these bodies. It's pretty insane. So they finish that off quite quickly. It didn't really stand much of a chance against this party. Earlier on, had they gone against this as one of the first ones, as the air cultists were the weakest of the lot, it might have been a bit more of a fight, but they just destroyed it. They have magical weapons now and enough magic to take on something like this. Unfortunately, through the night, they were without the services of Geth, whose electricity might have been, he's always useful when he's there. But unfortunately, he was on vacation, so he was not. So, the group goes around. They're still trying to find Terran. They've had very little success with this. And going through random caverns and the like, they hear the sounds of screams, which they deduce were actually the shrieking of wind going through a stalagmite garden, which was a neat natural phenomenon. I'm getting the book so I can reference correctly. Comes in handy sometimes. My memory isn't what it used to be. And the party found very little resistance in these caverns. Quite frankly, most of the air cultists were wiped out fighting water cultists. To the point they kept them out of their dungeon fairly well for the most part, but lost most of their peoples. Eventually, they pretty much straight tracked down to a cavern with a large pillar with a casket on top, a yellow casket, and a lake of luminescent water. They found out the water was fine, there's no dangers to it, there's some fish in it, but, I forgot one room. The ice room. They came into a room early on in the level that had an icy lake. A lake is a little bit of an extreme. This thing's only 90 feet long. It's more of a pond. But it was ice covered. In the room, the temperature in there was 30 below. It was frigid. And so they wanted to get through it quick. They were sure that this was going to be something horrible. Several of them were legitimately concerned that this was a place they had no business going into. But they dared to go across, and a couple of them slipped and fell. And Teus had this beautiful rolling leg drop right on top of... who was it? Who fell? I think it was Brock. Yeah, Brock fell down, and Teus just dropped the leg on him by accident, having his legs cut out from under him by ice. And they went in, and all of a sudden, the entire room flipped. It went from frigid cold to absolutely sweltering hot, and the lake started to instantly thaw and started to boil. And these bodies rose up, and they were trapped in and amongst themselves. Now, Brock tried to swim. He tried to cast Fly to get out of this. That didn't work because he's trapped in boiling water, and that really does do a number on your concentration. But Oriana picked him up and walked him out. The rest of them swam through the boiling water, taking a bit of damage, but in no great danger of drowning or anything. Like I said, the group is pretty stacked right now in terms of what they're capable of doing. They found out that all of the drowned bodies that were in the pond were deep gnomes. No idea why, they just found out they were deep gnomes. So, that kind of made them a little more annoyed. Then they fought the bloody elemental. Then they went around and found some interesting tunnels that had some interesting sounds coming out of them, screaming sounds, but for the most part, as I said, the group was not strictly all that challenged. Then the group went down a cavern, ignoring passages off to either side, the cavern that had the lake on it. Auric went up to examine the casket, and, well, turned out the casket was covered in yellow mold. Auric forgot that, yeah, yellow mold is a danger, and yellow can be a real big tip-off that something is dangerous, and he got sprayed in the face, but it's poison. He's a dwarf. He was fine. They burned off the mold. Fire, when you have somebody who has finger of fire, which now it turns out Brock has learned finger of fire. He scorched off all of the yellow mold on the casket, and they found out that the casket was of what's his name? Godwyd the Wormbane, Dragon Slayer and Peacekeeper. They opened up the tomb and they found out that inside was a bunch of dust, bones in a skeletal fashion, a cloven skull and helm, and a battered breastplate. And there's this gleaming short sword in the hands of the skeleton, and there was a blue bottle inside. So they were kind of, what are they going to do? Well, the group knew what they were going to do. There's treasure in front of them. Hello, magic. So they were going to loot it. Auric, on the other hand, even though he is a rogue, even though he is a thief, he is not a looter. And he is absolutely incensed that the group is thinking about plundering this place. Brock tried to steal the sword and the bottle right off the bat, which got him some pretty fierce looks from Auric. And as a group, they have to kind of decide what they're going to do now. This is where we ended. The group has... The sarcophagus is opened. They still don't know where Terran is. And it'll be interesting to see what the group decides to do from this point on. About half of the node has been explored already. And the group has more that they get to do next time, starting out with a bit of action. So, thank you for joining me. Hopefully, next time, we'll have the Earth node wrapped up and move forward to the exciting climax of the campaign. So, the battle against Old Hydra is not completely over yet, that's for sure. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you all the next time. I have more to report on the deeds of the heroes in Princes of the Apocalypse. Thank you, and farewell. Right? Who's the happy kitty? So happy.